In this video, what I'll show you is how to sample a vector. The way you're going to do this is you're going to use a command called sample, and what it's going to need to sample a vector is it's going to need a vector to take a sample from. Now, what I mean by taking a sample is basically whatever values are in the vector. They're going to be placed on rubber balls by the computer, thrown in the bucket, and the computer is going to pretend to reach into the bucket and just randomly pick some of them out. So we start by using this sample function. We tell it what vector we want to use, what values we want to have in the bucket. In this particular case, I have our variable y that contains a vector of 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to sample that. And then what I have to do is I have to tell it how many items I want to sample. And that's the second option here, size. And let's say I just want to take 3 items out. And then the next thing I want to tell it is if I want to replace items. So what this is saying is after I've selected a ball out of this theoretical bucket, do I want to place it back in there so it could possibly be selected again, or do I want to leave it out so it can't be selected again? By default, it doesn't replace the balls, so every single ball has to be a different one when they're selected here. So I'll just run this real quick, and you'll see I got 3, 4, 1. So it just reached in, got those. I'll have it run it again. Got 1, 3, 4. So it got some things in a different order. I'll have it run it again. This time it got the 2 and didn't get the 3. Okay, so if I do replace equals false, basically that bucket, once a ball is removed from it, it can't select that number again. Now if I change that value here to true, what will happen is each time it reaches in, it takes a ball out and checks the number, puts it back in, and if it's totally possible you get different ones, and it's totally possible well, in this case, you got the same number 3 times. So that's what these first 3 options here do for you. Now there's a 4th option here that I'm going to show you, and that's going to basically come from using a different vector that I've loaded up here. And this other vector is called bucket, and you'll see here it contains a 0, a 1, a 1, a 1, and a 1. So it might very well be I want to reach into the bucket, and I want to select, we'll say 2 items, and then I want to replace after each. Doesn't matter if I use replace or not right here for the point I'm going to try to make here. So I can set this up like this, and I have bucket set up, and it contains 4 1s and 1 0. So the 1s have a better shot of being picked. And in fact, that's what gets picked in this case. And if I run it again, the 1s still have a better shot of being picked. I mean, they always do. But suppose originally I didn't want to make the bucket look like that. I didn't want to have a 0 and have to type in all the 1s there. I could do something like this. I'll say I'll make a vector, b, and it'll only contain 0 and 1. And if I do something like that, you'll notice I've got 0 and 1 over there. What I can do, and I'll just clear that screen out for us here, is I can still do the same thing. I can still have it make selections in the exact same way using a bucket that theoretically has 4 1s and 1 0 in it. The way I do that is I'd use my vector b, and what did I do last time? I just selected 2 things out of there. So I'll do size equals 2. I do replace equals true, and then this last option here, it basically looks something like this. It's called prob, and I'm going to just type in the probabilities I want for each of these. And so I just make a vector here, and if you look at this bucket one here, the chance that I'd get a 0 out of it would have been 1/5, and the chance that I'd get a 1 out of it would have been 4/5. So that's what I'm going to type into it. I'm going to type in a new vector, and first value is going to be 1/5, second value is going to be 4/5. And now that's acting exactly the same as when I did this option right here. So they're both equivalent, and just dumb luck I got the same 2 values at this time. But they're equivalent versions of this. You're going to want to do something like this option up here, especially if you know you got like say 10,000 things in there. The chance of something is getting a particular number is going to be very, very small. If you really wanted to mimic that using a bucket with all the actual values, you'd have to type in a lot of values, whereas this saves you a lot of trouble here if you make a vector like this, and it just gives you the probabilities for each particular item. Okay, so that's how you can go about sampling a vector.